Republicans in the House of Representatives are absolutely losing it right now after a federal judge in New York responded to a letter brief filed by Democratic Congressmember Ro Khanna along with Republican Congressmember Thomas Massie, who's basically been pushed out of the Republican Party in the House of Representatives. Remember, they brought that discharge petition that led to the Epstein Transparency Act, which the Trump regime has violated, and the Trump regime has refused to produce the Epstein files. They've only turned over about 1%. So you'll recall that Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie sent a letter to federal Judge Engelmeyer in the Southern District of New York, and they wanted to intervene in a case there regarding Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, and they were requesting that that federal judge appoint a special master or independent monitor to oversee the production of the Epstein files so that it could be in the hands of someone independent versus the Trump regime, since the Department of Justice has been essentially turned into a racketeering enterprise for the purpose of covering up a child sex trafficking ring. Well, Federal Judge Engelmeyer responded this morning, and in an order, he ordered the Trump regime to respond about the request that was made by Khanna and Massie about whether they can intervene to request a special referee or independent monitor or special master to turn over the documents, and what their position is about their non-compliance with the Epstein Transparency Act. And so how are MAGA Republicans who are getting their orders from Donald Trump responding? They were just losing it on Capitol Hill today, and we've got the receipts, we've got the videos, we've got what went down. So here you have MAGA Republican Congress member James Comer, who chairs the House Oversight Committee, and he responds by saying, well, to the best of my knowledge, the Department of Justice is doing everything right. He says, we're cooperating, they're cooperating. This is the transparency that the American people want. And the MAGA Republicans, James Comer and others, are saying it's actually going great and the files are being produced. So why is everybody upset? Listen to what Comer says. Here, play this clip.
Bonding for the documents. She started producing the documents. Then Congress voted for the discharge petition to send another message, and we all voted for that. They are sending documents. They sent a big batch. The Democrats were unhappy. They said there weren't enough redactions, so now the DOJ is going through trying to make sure they redact everything. So as from my standpoint, the Department of Justice is cooperating. They are turning over documents. We would all like for them to turn documents over quicker. But at the end of the day, they are complying. President Trump is answering your questions about Epstein. He's answered them over and over and over again. Who we haven't heard from is Bill Clinton. And I stated why. The amount of time that Epstein spent with Clinton while he was president and post-presidency. So I don't think it's out of line for former President Clinton to come in for a bipartisan subpoena and sit down and answer questions. So thank you all very much.
And then James Comer says that at the end of the day, the key thing here is we're subpoenaing Bill Clinton. That's his big announcement. And we're going to hold Bill Clinton in contempt if he doesn't show up. This is about Bill Clinton, not Donald Trump or anybody else. Let's make it about the Clintons. Here, play this clip.
Unanimously by the committee in a bipartisan manner, we will move next week in the House Oversight Committee markup to hold former President Clinton in contempt of Congress.
Yeah. So, by the way, just release the Epstein documents. Bill Clinton's called for the release of the Epstein documents. I'm not here defending Bill Clinton or any. Just focus on releasing the Epstein documents as required. You see, they want to just try to distract you with everything else. And then James Comer says that Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader, should go to a Somali therapy center and get some type of therapy for his disdain for me, because Leader Jeffries was calling out James Comer and other MAGA Republicans for covering up a child sex trafficking ring. So James Comer says that Jeffries needs to go to a Somali therapy center. I mean, these people are so despicable. Here, play this clip.
On Epstein Island right now?
Bill, go ahead.
We asked Hakeem Jeffries about this last night, and he called you a deeply unserious person, said he doesn't have faith in you to lead this investigation. How would you like to respond to him?
Well, look, the feeling's mutual. I don't have any confidence in Hakeem Jeffries. I don't think Hakeem Jeffries ever mentioned my name the first 9 years I was in Congress. In the last 2 months, he's mentioned my name and made slurs at least 5 times. I think that Trump derangement syndrome is morphing into Comer derangement syndrome for Hakeem Jeffries. So my advice to Hakeem Jeffries is, first of all, recognize the fact that the members in your conference voted to subpoena Bill Clinton. It was the Democrat members of the Congress that voted for that subpoena, number one. And number two, he clearly has a problem with me. Maybe he should go to one of those Somali therapy centers and get some type of therapy for his disdain for me. If he's accusing me of any wrongdoing, then he should file a complaint.
And then MAGA tried to distract with everything else. So you have MAGA Mike Johnson, who said, look, the thing when Donald Trump talks about capping interest rates at 10% for credit cards, Donald Trump's like a thought guy. He's the one who comes up with ideas, but that doesn't mean that they're real ideas. Listen to what MAGA Mike says. Play this clip.
The president is the ideas guy. And what he's doggedly determined to do and laser focused upon doing is the same thing that we are, and that is reducing the cost of living, bringing down prices for the American people. And he's looking at every idea under the sun to do that. It's one of a large menu of ideas that have been proposed as something we ought to think about and investigate. Since I had the conversation with him, I've talked to a number of colleagues about that and what that would mean, and are there unintended consequences of that? And it's a complicated area. So I don't know. Like everything else, you would need legislation to do something like that, and we'd have a lot of work to build consensus around it. But you got to be very careful if you go forward in that. In our zeal to bring down costs, you don't want to have negative secondary effects of that. So, for example, one of the things that the president probably had not thought through, and others at first glance, it sounds great. We should bring down, interest rates to 10%. It would help everybody, all borrowers. There's a lot of Americans who have a lot of credit card debt. But then, what some of the experts have said is, well, but the problem is if you do that, then the credit card companies, the negative secondary effect is that they would just stop lending money, and maybe they cap what people are able to borrow at a very low amount. And then that would have a negative effect on a lot of people who work on revolving credit. So it's something that we got to be very deliberate about. The president understands that. He wants us to do the right thing by America.
Then you have MAGA Mike speaking about invading Greenland, and he goes, this is just a media narrative. Nobody's out there really talking about acquiring Greenland or invading, or that all options are on the table. This is just a narrative invented by the media, by you all. Okay, we can hear what Donald Trump and Caroline Leavitt and Stephen Miller and all the people in the Trump regime say every day. Play this clip. I
don't think anybody is considering that. I mean, it's not been in any briefing I've been in, and I go to all of them. Okay, I think this is a media narrative that's been created. I do. We've been very clear. I mean, the Article 1 branch is clear. There's no declaration of war pending for Greenland. It's not a thing. I don't anticipate any boots on the ground anywhere anytime soon. And
And then Steve Scalise goes, well, what's going on with Biden? Why are the prices so high under Joe Biden? I kid you not. That's what he said. Here, play this clip.
Owners to address some of the rules and regulations that added so much to the cost of things. When you go buy things all across the spectrum, why are prices so high under Joe Biden? But it's really interesting when you hear Democrats yelling and screaming about the cost of things. My question is, where were those Democrats when they were jacking up all those costs on families for 4 years under Joe Biden? Did Democrats forget? And do they think voters are going to forget that under Joe Biden for 4 years, gas prices doubled? Yes, doubled. Did they?
More from MAGA Mike right here when he's asked about Donald Trump launching a criminal investigation into the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell. MAGA Mike Johnson says, Powell's not the Fed. Powell's just a person. He's an individual. It's not like he's actually the Federal Reserve. So what are we worried about here? Here, play this clip.
Chairman Powell's an individual. He is not the Fed. He's the chair of the Fed, okay? And it's a serious allegation if he was not truthful in testimony to Congress. That is not a congressional investigation. That's a DOJ investigation. We have to let that play out. I mean, we don't play favorites or favoritism here. The DOJ can't. If there's a credible allegation or concern that someone's lied to Congress, then the DOJ should investigate. I mean, across the board, no matter who it is, no one is immune from that. If he's innocent, as he says, then that will come out in the investigation. And all of us need to reserve judgment and wait for that to happen. Meanwhile, the Fed is continuing to do its work. And, I mentioned there.
Then MAGA Mike further defames Renee Good. Let's play this clip.
The angle that I saw was this woman was taunting ICE officers. She was impeding law enforcement. She was violating a number of laws in doing so. They were very patient and asked her multiple times to remove her vehicle and stop impeding their operation, and she refused. Her partner, whoever that was taunting the officer. It was a crazy set of circumstances. And from the angle I saw, this is my view. I'm not the investigator and I'm not the judge and jury, but I'll tell you what I saw is that the vehicle, she hit the accelerator and hit the ICE officer, and he reacted in a split second. And it will be up to the investigators and everyone else to determine the outcome.
And then MAGA Mike attacks former President Biden and says that right now, under Donald Trump, everybody is buying big trucks again. Everybody's rich and everybody's buying big trucks again under Donald Trump. Who's buying big trucks again under Donald Trump? Who's this everybody who has all of this disposable income buying big trucks right now? What do you even mean by that? Here, play this clip.
It's under $3. And under the Biden years, it cost Americans more than $60 just to fill up a Honda Civic or a Toyota Camry. And now everybody's buying the big trucks again, Thanks to sound economic and energy policy that has restored American energy dominance, those days of the Biden years are over, and we're going into overdrive. And we're not going backwards.
And so that brings us to the Department of Justice launching that criminal investigation into the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell. I want to bring in Congressmember Brendan Boyle for this, ranking member of the House Budget Committee. Congressman, it's great to see you. One of the things that I reflect on, though, is in a normal time, if a president of the United States ordered his DOJ to criminally investigate the chairman of the Federal Reserve, the markets and everything would 100% absolutely collapse because you would take it seriously.
Right.
I think that we should be taking the action seriously of what Trump's doing, but still with his tariffs against the world, or he posts the other day, if you do business with Iran, I hereby tariff you 25%, which, what does that mean? United Arab Emirates, China, additional 25% tariffs there. How are you going? What does that even mean? People and the markets don't take it seriously. And so the market's like, yeah, that's just, this is noise. Trump says these things. The investigation will go away. He'll taco or chicken out. He needs to get this. He just needs to get this off his chest. But I say you need to take this stuff very seriously, because at some point this stuff hits the wall and then we all get screwed. So what do you make of that? Because obviously, there's this, the markets just don't, but his words don't matter the way they did back in April, let's say, when he had that Liberation Day thing, or Liquidation Day.
It's so funny that you're saying this, because not even about 20 minutes ago, a Democratic colleague and I were both having this conversation, and we were both perplexed at how the markets are just completely shrugging their shoulders at this point. Yesterday, they were up slightly. Today, they're down slightly. They obviously do not take Donald Trump seriously, as you've said. I also think it's a reflection of the fact they have a great deal of confidence in our criminal justice system that this pathetic and dangerous gambit legally it just won't work, and that Mr. Powell is not really under any serious legal problem. What I would say to them is, boy, I hope your confidence isn't overconfidence, and I hope it isn't misplaced, because we could be in store for a very rude awakening if this pressure, this unprecedented illegal criminal pressure from Donald Trump actually succeeds. I give Jay Powell a lot of credit. I mean, he's a traditional, old school country club Republican, served in Republican administrations going back to George Herbert Walker Bush in the late 80s and early 90s. He's a lot of integrity to stand up to this pressure. I fear, though, that it will ultimately have some sort of effect, and that would be bad, even though I would love to see, I think we would all love to see lower rates and to pay less for our mortgage and auto loans. The reality, though, is if these decisions are being driven by politics and political pressure and not the data, they could end up sparking an inflation crisis that we will have to live through and suffer through for years and years to come.
Let's talk about where inflation is today. Obviously, this is top of mind to you and many Americans, but specifically on the budget committee. I think it was core inflation came in at like 2.7, which was basically what it was in December. One of the things I always think is important when we have the inflation discussion is that the consumer price index used by the Bureau of Labor Statistics to help derive these inflation numbers is now based on, the last time I checked, I think the number was 40% of the data inputs are estimates, because there's not enough people gathering the data and sending out the surveys to the businesses anymore. So 40% of this is, whatever, it's a very high number, is estimates. May help us make sense of this, because we know that Trump fired the last Bureau of Labor Statistics chief when he didn't like the data. So are we getting even accurate data? And assuming we are getting accurate data, how do you contextualize 2.7% inflation where we are right now?
It's funny. I think people, even if they're not paying attention to CPI data, they just kind of know from their own personal experience that America just simply is too expensive right now. In order to get by in the United States of America today, things cost too much, and the cost is going up rather than down. Donald Trump won the presidency just over a year ago because he promised he would bring prices down. And what has he done? He's only driven prices up because of his ridiculous tariff policies, which basically is an added national sales tax that the American people have to pay on any imported good. And most of the goods we buy tend to be imported. So, and by the way, if you're a billionaire, you got the biggest tax cut in American history. If you're on Obamacare, Medicare, Medicaid, you got screwed because he is cutting your health care. If you get your health care through your employer, your costs will now go up because providers and hospitals need to make up the costs that they're going to pay because of all of the cuts they're suffering. So the reality is inflation was headed in the right direction about a year and a half ago. We were almost back after many years, after the whole post-pandemic crisis. We were almost back to 2%, almost back to normal. Donald Trump comes in, and it's been chaos ever since, costs going up with really no sign of them coming down anytime soon.
I think that's why when most Americans hear 2.7%, first off, it's year over year. So, they need to understand what that number actually means. 2%, 2.7% more than the previous year where prices were already high. But I think intuitively, and I don't want to always take our own life experiences and supplant them for a broader data set out there. But I think you speak to most Americans and they don't feel it's a little bit higher. They feel it's significantly higher.
And they are, and they're right. I mean, they are right, especially when you compare, the inflation month over month, year over year, this year compared to 2-3 years ago. I always find that actually you need both the quantitative data and the qualitative data. And in this case, one set confirms the other. And that is inflation is the biggest problem today. Affordability that Donald Trump has called a hoax. That is by far the biggest issue for the American people today. And we have a president who couldn't care less. He just cares about playing interior decorator and building his ballrooms and delivering big tax cuts for billionaires like himself.
Yeah, and that's the thing, so he did a little bit of a pivot. So he went from hoax to now he'll go back to it because that's his nature. But now he does the Trump fraud routine for the midterms where he announces he did something, which he did not do, and then hasn't thought through the implications. So, for example, I'm going to cap credit card interest at 10%, but his announcement says, I hereby order that it will be said on January 20th that I will order that this take place. And for a lot of Americans on the surface, that's a good, interest rates being too high, not a, people don't like paying, way more money, but also it needs to go through a law. He's not doing anything the same way when he claims that he's brought healthcare costs down 1,600%, but 350 drugs are more expensive and healthcare prices are significantly higher year over year. But he decrees he's now capped credit card interest. He has not capped credit card interest. And then he also hasn't thought through what's the impact this going to have on other types of borrowers and just what's going to happen. Like these things aren't thought out with hearings. And how are we going to address all of these concerns at once? And then you should do a law if we want to do that and get a law and then we're good. And then he does that with, he knows that people hate some of these data centers that are going up, that are making energy prices rise. So he does a social media post and says, I hereby have ordered Microsoft to do X, Y. But it's meaningless, and he takes credit for things that he's not doing, and the American people, meanwhile, still suffer. And by the way, Congressman, where's our Doge dividend checks? Where are our tariff rebate checks that he promised? Where's all that money he said he was going to send to the American people?
Well, when we've talked before, I've said this. I genuinely believe Donald Trump is the most successful con man in American history. This is his latest con. You and I both know, for the reasons you just outlined, that Donald Trump ordering something via social media does not make it a law, does not mean it's going to happen. But he's trying to con people. He wants the casual viewer, the casual observer, the casual reader to see, oh, this is great. Donald Trump's sticking up for me. He's capping my credit card interest. And hoping that person will believe the con. And then it'll be forgotten about, and that person will move on to something else. The media will move on to cover the next shiny object. And Trump is hoping then that same person come back election time will say, yeah, I like that Donald Trump. He brought down my credit card costs, even though you and I both know it's total bullshit. So that's how Donald Trump has operated. And frankly, he's been able to get away with it, which is the most frustrating thing, which why the most important thing we can do in 2026, candidly, is for those of us on the Democratic side of the aisle to win this election and take back the House, because then we'd finally be able to rein in King Donald and all of his cons.
Before we go, Congressman, anything else you think we didn't cover that you want our audience to know before we go?
Well, I just do quickly want to point out I have an op-ed that just ran in the Philadelphia Inquirer. You can check it out on their website. And I entitled it Breaking the World We Built. And it is in reference to the possible U.S. invasion of Greenland, something that until not that long ago, you would have thought was a crazy Saturday Night Live skit because it seems so absurd. And yet this is actually now deadly serious. Make no mistake about it. This would be the end of the world that we created out of the ashes of World War II, and that has kept us out of a World War III scenario. NATO and all of the institutions we created that help protect the peace and help the United States and help keep us as a prosperous, peaceful nation, those would go away. We suddenly would be the world pariah, similar to Russia after the invasion of Ukraine. That's how deadly the consequences are if Donald Trump were to do the once unthinkable and actually invade Greenland.
Congressman, thanks for your time as always.
All right, thank you.
Congressman Brendan Boyle, everybody. And hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million subscribers.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.